I think part of our opportunity is not to see how we bring people into our projects, but actually how we put ourselves in service to what people have going on. Because in putting ourselves in service to our local community, what we get back for our projects is unquantifiable.
Hello and welcome. I am here with a dear and old friend, Tricia Stapleton, who I've known since just about when I arrived in the country. Tricia used to live up in the region where I live here now in Celedon, but now she lives down in the Osa Peninsula, running up a project with a collective of people called Igarones. Hey, Tricia, thanks for joining us.
Jason, it's such a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've been watching what you've been up to from afar since you moved away, and it's so exciting to see your face pop up in little videos here and there. And we saw each other in the bioregional conference, or at least I saw your video, your face in one of the presentations there. And yeah, it's really exciting to get you on the podcast here and share what you guys are doing in the OSA, because it started from a small little collective of people and a little hub of a spot, and you're really growing. So it's exciting to be able to tell people about what you guys are up to.
Thanks, Jason. It's funny too that you say you've been following me, because that's one of the things that we're not really doing. We're doing the work here, and it's like, oh, but we're not really telling the story. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, so that we have more opportunity to tell the story of what we're doing, share that with others, so that people can see what we're learning, people can see what we're activating, and people can see all the possibilities that are here.
Right. Yeah, I think the following you has actually come for a lot through mutual friends sending me little links here and there when they find you, like, oh, check out what Trisha's doing. So, um, I as much as I know a little bit about your backstory, go ahead and share with our audience a little bit about maybe briefly how you got to Costa Rica and your journey here that's brought you to what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, I've actually been in Costa Rica for 22 years now. And I love the number two, so I just love how that keeps popping up. Um, so I moved to Costa Rica actually out of love. I met my partner in Mexico at the time, and I had just liberated myself from a position within public policy within San Francisco, and had really felt that I had reached the end of my journey there, and was looking for something new. And then in popped my partner, and he said, "Come to Costa Rica and come see me." And so I moved from a urban social justice activist into a very, very rural farmer. And through that experience, got to know many farmers in this area. As you know, we live in a very agricultural area. And I was just, as somebody who was urban, I was so impressed with the dedication, the hard work, and the love of the land that farmers in this country have. I could really feel that it was kind of running through their blood, that knowledge of the land. And so I looked to them as my teachers and learned a lot, and also saw the economic difficulties that they were facing in dealing with this globalized food system, and really trying to produce beautiful, nutritious food, but not being able to get it to a market. So way back when, probably, I think it was about 16 years ago, my partner Jim, we were living up in the mountains, and he was a surfer, and he said, "Oh no, I have to go down back to the beach." And so he made his way back here to the Osa. And because we were doing this long distance relationship with him on the Osa and me in Chiripo, I decided to start a farmer's market down on the Osa, so that when I was visiting him, I could come down there and I could bring these fresh vegetables from the farmers I was working with in Perez And so I did that for about 6 years, and that was a lot, and kind of burned out on that after 6 years. Someone else took that over, and then I actually began a journey of doing a lot of personal work and a lot of transformational work, and then started working with groups and hosting transformational retreats with Jim down here on the Osa for small groups. And I was so impressed with the coherence that we could create among people in a really short period of time. But these were self-selected groups. These were people that were able to kind of sign up for a retreat and join in. And I really wanted to see if that type of coherence could be created in my larger community. Never kind of losing track of that desire to really see the ways that I, as a foreigner who have been welcomed into this place, could really bring what I might have to the local community and help to integrate that and provide support within my home place. And so after about 8 years of hosting these retreats, I stepped back and and basically started Higarones, which was from the beginning an experimentation of how to take this coherence that I was experiencing with these retreat groups and bring it out into my larger community. Higarone
Can I ask
started,
you, how long ago was that?
so Higarone started 2/2/22. I'm sorry,
Oh,
2/2/2020.
okay.
So that was February 2nd of 2020. So we're coming up on our 3-year anniversary. What we started with, well, let me go back and say that Jim and I had a building in Puerto Jimenez, which is the town that we live closest to. We actually live about 17 kilometers south of here, more in the jungle. But our hub town is called Puerto Jimenez, which is on the Golfo Dulce, down on the Osa Peninsula. And Jim and I had this building here that was formerly a bilingual multicultural elementary school that had closed about 3 years prior. And the building was just sitting empty. And Jason, as you know, as somebody who's lived here a long time, you really have to give love to your spaces.
Yeah.
You can't
Things
just let
atrophy
them
quickly.
be. They very, very much do. And that's what was happening to the space. And and so I said to Jim, can I just maybe start feeling into the space and maybe see if it wants to be something? And so with that, on February 2nd, we hosted our first, we called it a stone soup social. And basically, it was we just made a call out to the community like, hey, let's get together and bring an ingredient, and we'll make a nice big lunch together and do a little activity and just have space with one another, just begin to gather. And we set it up to do it for the month of February on every Wednesday. And at the end of February, everybody was like, yeah, let's just keep going. And so we went into the middle of March until, of course, COVID hit, right? And then we got the directive for everybody to go and be away from one another and be at home. And so for about 6 weeks, we were shut down. But as you know, Costa Rica's economy is very dependent on tourism. Here on the OSA, it's probably about 80% of our economy was tourism. So once the pandemic started and everything was closed down, our economy just stopped. And so people were being told to stay at home. They were being told, to stay in place, but yet people were suffering because there was no economy left. And so we started to look at, okay, how do we start to do some mutual aid work? And I started working with a group that had formed to get emergency food boxes to some of the families that were most affected. And so we were doing these emergency food boxes as often as we could, a canasta básico. Initially, the first couple of weeks, it was started out of the local well, it wasn't the local supermarket. It was a supermarket that we have here that is actually a chain. And I said, you know, guys, if we're going to do this, let's look at how we can maximize this for our local economy, given that our local economy is suffering so much. And I always believe that if you're going to make a suggestion to people who are taking on work, that you have to be willing to take on that work as well.
Yes.
And so I said, and I will help. Allow me to start sourcing as much as we can from the local economy. I had been working with farmers over the years because, as I said, I just have so much respect and love for them. And so I started sourcing the things from the canasta básico from different local farmers. And those things that we couldn't get here, we started sourcing from a local bodega as opposed to the chain supermarket. So
My
slowly but
local bodega, this was a bodega. Bodega being, for those that don't know, it's like a warehouse. It's a word for a warehouse, right? So a local warehouse or a storage facility of somebody, but it wasn't the local supermarket.
it wasn't the
But where
supermarket. It
who
was
was holding provisions that you were able to access
Well,
locally?
it was actually a local store, but more like a wholesaling store, right? So and locally owned and sourced, you know, so that you could obtain things at the best price possible and be supporting a local business. So maybe bodega isn't the right word, but they call themselves a bodega. But it's basically a distribution, more of a wholesale distribution site.
Okay, so this was a local store that was already sourcing things locally and selling them, and you tapped into them to use that network that they already had and that surplus that they might have had and integrate with that. Am
Exactly.
I
And
hearing you
then,
right?
yes, and then tapping in with our very local farmers, like our subsistence farmers. And so one week I was actually going and distributing boxes, and I brought a box to a farmer named Don Juan. And what I recognized was that Don Juan was a farmer that I used to work at the farmer's market with 15 years prior. And I was saying to myself, why is a farmer experiencing food problems? Why is a farmer not able to feed his family? Right. And
Powerful question.
yeah, and it really just broke my heart. And so I started visiting Don Juan and wondering what was the choke point, right? And for him, it was that the produce that he was growing, he couldn't get out to market. So we started a program called Cajas Verdes, which is a CSA program. And with the Caja Verde, we went around to different local farmers and we said, we will buy what you have. And then we went to different customers and we said, look, the local farmers really need our support. Will you subscribe to a CSA box, to a Caja Verde? And we will put together a beautiful array of greens and root crops and local fruits that are in season and whatever the farmers have and deliver to you this CSA box. And thus began our activation economically with the local farmers that still continues to this day. So the Caja Verde started in August of 2020. And then in August of 2021, it morphed into our now current Mercado Verde, which is our local farmers market, because the restrictions on gathering had eased up enough that we could start a market. And so now for almost, yeah, for a little over 2 years, we have been working with the local farms and local consumers to really boost up our consumption of local produce.
Awesome. So let me just kind of back up and recap here. So you already over the years had begun developing this farmers market, and it was going and happening, and people were taking advantage of that. And then the pandemic came around, and you found that needed to do it a new way. So you started talking with local suppliers. You reached out to the supermarket at first, and they were somewhat supportive, but it was still extracting from outside of your region. And the Osa Peninsula, for anyone who doesn't know, is a fairly it's a peninsula. It's relatively isolated compared to like Celadon, which is a center of movement. And so everything has to get shipped down into the far reaches of where you're at. And the grocery store was bringing that. But then you found this other local store, bodega, that was able to enhance what you already had, a network of farmers that you were working with for the market. And this bodega helped to fortify that. And so you guys turned that whole thing into this CSA, or community supported agriculture system, where you had your network of farmers contributing to food, and then you reached out to the people in the community who wanted to subscribe to this. Can you tell me a little bit more about like the details, the steps that it really took? Because that's a lot of organization. I've thought about wanting to do that myself in regions here, and I've got my own idea for how that would work out and how we could do it well. But can you tell me a little bit more, the step by step of the organizational process that you went through to bring that CSA together? And then you said it's gone into a farmer's market again. Are you still doing the box delivery program as well as the market, or is that dissolved? I guess that's two
Yeah,
questions.
thanks for those questions, Jason, because they're key. Because starting up a CSA is a lot of work. Especially a lot of logistical work. Because I had this building that was a former school, it had a lot of space in it. And during that time, because the economy had basically dropped out, there were friends who were kind of on the move and moving from places that they were renting and needing to have a place to live. So I invited a couple, Emily and William, who came to live on site here. I also invited another woman, Carmen, who was a community organizer, who came to live here on site. And then there was another couple, Luis and Elisette, who were Chilenos who were traveling from Canada to back to Chile when they got stuck here in Costa Rica and couldn't continue traveling. And so they were kind of pandemic refugees. And so I invited them to live here. So there were 6 of us here on site who were actually helping to make this happen. I don't think we would have been able to make that happen if we were in the state that we are now, or prior to the pandemic, when everyone had so much going on in their lives, right? Where it's like, oh, where do we find the time? But at that time, so many things were on pause. And also, there weren't very many opportunities for people to connect with one another, but people were longing for this connection. And so, by being able to do the CSA project, not only were we boosting this local food, but we were keeping our community able to be with one another, able to connect, able to hug one another, share a meal together. And so we had different talents on site, right? We had William, who was just this amazing organizational person, and he created the spreadsheets to do the CSA. And then Carmen was really good in social media and getting the information out. And then Elisette and Luis were very good with the logistics. So everybody kind of had their space. And it was one of the things that I was noticing when I was stepping back to that idea that came up for me around how do we create this type of coherence that we were experiencing in our retreats, and recognizing that we're not meant to do things alone, that we bring certain gifts and we're meant to be bringing those gifts. But we're not meant to be bringing all the gifts, that we have to figure out how to work together, how to see what our strengths are, and how to know what is not ours to do. And then find the people who it is theirs to do and invite them to join. I think that for me is absolutely key. That is what I continue to carry in a way as my North Star of how we move forward. I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh who said the next Buddha will be the Sangha. And the Sangha is a community of practice, right, in Buddhism. And the next Buddha will be the Sangha. We need to do these things together. I have the privilege of living among 2.5% of the Earth's biodiversity. And so I'm constantly outside and I see how everything in nature works with one another, right? The death of something is the food of the other. This tree is not trying to be a bush, nor is the bush trying to be a rock, right? How do we bring all of those things together in our own human communities so that we can all flourish and be able to bring our gifts and not burn ourselves out?
It's something I've come up to again and again and again in this journey, and now in the position I'm in, I have so many people come to me talking about community and organization, and yeah, in another week and a half, I'm going to be launching an event that I've had in mind since before the pandemic when I had to put it on pause, but it's a business incubator for landowners. And there's one thing about like taking online courses, or for me to teach people online what I've learned about organizational structures and this is and that's. But what I've really known at the core through the entirety of even starting this podcast is that one of our greatest as a movement of regenerative projects or land-based projects, especially because when you bring into it owning land or stewarding land, or however you want to relate to it, it has such a huge amount of responsibilities that come with it, that if you wanted to do anything else besides just maintain what's going on and maybe build a few things, you can struggle if you don't have a team. And one of the things I realized when I left my project after 7 years and came back after a few more in the States was that the thing we were always missing was each other. And that so many of these projects, they're struggling and struggling. And just like the farmer you were talking about, here's this guy with all the food in the world, yet he was struggling because he couldn't get it to market. He couldn't, like, it's just too much for him to also find people to buy what he had to sell. So he couldn't eat all of what he was growing, and he couldn't sell what he was growing to get money to buy the things he wasn't growing. And they're struggling with all that abundance for lack of a team and lack of coordination. And along with this business incubator, that's really, while I have presenters that are each slotted to talk about some really great topics, I knew in designing this event and the 4 months of follow-up going thereafter that really the resilience comes with us doing this together. And even launching another product after this incubator's over is going to be something we talked about about a year ago, is a mastermind, a membership where we can come together on a regular basis and support each other on the things that are tough for us and unite around the common difficulties that we have and help each other ask clarifying questions, and even to be able to give advice in the company of each other so that we can all rise up together. And so I think what you're doing, organizing things down there, is just absolutely wonderful and crucial, and that you've brought people together off of their individual projects to come together as a collective, both locally, and now we'll talk about a little bit later what you're doing regionally with Regenerosa. I really just love your approach of being inclusive to the collective and taking the value of that as a prime importance. I'd like to move on a little to explore a little bit more about what you guys are doing, but I really I think that this CSA program is something that is has proven to build not only community resilience, but the crucial, indispensable assistance that many farmers need to be able to run a consistent program and to be able to consistently provide food. Is there anything else, like any little tricks that you found out, any surprises or any advice you could offer to people who want to start a CSA that maybe something they hadn't thought of yet, something that you find to be the key to making it all work well?
Well, I would say that in addition to having your standard box, having extras available for people to order makes it that much more of a dynamic program, right? So, like for instance, we have people who make fresh coconut oil here, or we have trapiche that has tapa dulce. We have people who make sauerkraut or who make chileros, but those things aren't going into our regular box. But if people are just ordering just a box, then that's that much more of a hurdle. I think we have to be conscious that we have to meet people where we are. And that was a huge learning curve for me, right? Because I'm just kind of all in. And so I was going from my perspective that other people are all in, but other people aren't all in. And we also really have to recognize that that this consumer culture that we have been kind of subjected to throughout our lives has had psychological effects on us that are very difficult to undo. Like you really have to do the work inside of yourself to kind of step outside of the dream, if you will, or the nightmare, if you would call it that, and really look at how can I impact my community? And so being able to kind of meet people where they are and recognize that they don't necessarily know the steps to be able to buy from the local farmer first. So spelling it out to them, like now that we have a market on Saturdays, we're like, come to the market first, see what the producers have. Then from the market, go to your vegetable store, see what they have. And then as your last step, go to the supermarket. Yes, it's a few more steps, but what it means for the farmers is very important. I think telling the story of the farmers as much as we can is also very important. Like how just a very little amount of support for them means a great, great deal. And then also recipes, nutritional information. A lot of the produce, especially here, that's being grown.
What's this? What do I do with this?
Exactly, exactly. Even yucca, I mean, it was beautiful because I've been living in Costa Rica for 22 years. It wasn't until we started the CSA that I actually learned how to open a yucca with the skin in a way that you just kind of peel it off whole instead of cutting. It's like we just don't know these things. This is not natural for us, right? So sharing that information. And then in sharing that information, we also get to share a little bit more about the culture that we're embedded in. And I think that is super important, is just recognizing that we are coming into an already existing culture. And how do we, as people who really care about regeneration and really care about being good stewards in our place, how do we really not just put ourselves in service to the land, but put ourselves in service to the communities that we're moving into? If I could, I also wanted to touch in on another project that we have that is related to that, which is called Manos Cambiadas. And manos cambiados in South America, they call it mingas. In the United States, more currently, it would be called like a crop mob, or how the Amish used to do like a barn raising, right? But it's basically neighbors going out to neighbors and helping to do what they need to get done. And so one of the ways that we looked at how do we put ourselves in service to the community is recognizing that so many of the farmers that are in this area are they're elderly, just like in the States and many other places. They're elderly, and the next generation is not interested in farming because there's really no respect in it and no money in it. And so these are people who are just really doing everything they can, but really on their own. And so we instituted this program called Manos Cambiadas, which is a very old program here in Costa Rica because farmers and neighbors used to do it all the time. When you needed to plant a few hectares of rice, well, you and your family, it's going to take a long time to do that. But if your neighbors come and they help you do it, and then you go and do it for your neighbor, then it gets done not just quickly, but it gets done with just so much joy and so much camaraderie. And so we started Manos Cambiadas right actually at the beginning of the pandemic. We started it on May 1st of 2020 on Labor Day. And we started with just 6 volunteers going out to that one farmer's farm, Don Juan, and helping him to harvest his yucca and get his field ready for the next crop. And then the next week, we went to a different farm. And the next week, we went to a different farm. And what we found from doing the Manos Cambiadas, because mostly it was foreigners and it was ticos from other parts of Costa Rica who had started doing the Manos Cambiadas together. But once we started putting ourselves in service to the local farmers, then the juice started. And then we had local farmers who were all participating in the Manos Cambiadas. So that's when the real cultural interaction and that's when the real community building with our community that we are situated in started. And so going back to that affinity, going back to that aligning with where we are, I think part of our opportunity is not to see how we bring people into our projects, but actually how we put ourselves in service to what people have going on. Because in putting ourselves in service to our local community, what we get back for our projects is unquantifiable.
It's so important. Wow, that's huge, Tricia. And it's so easy to overlook. We're so inundated with our own often self-imposed, list of things we need to do, and so much of the teachings around creating a project is how to get the word out and let people know about what you're doing and invite people in and make it attractive for them and present it in a way that they're going to like what you're doing. And like so much of the teachings around building a successful program are revolve around that. And you're totally right. The really one of the most, I don't know, I want to use all kinds of adjectives, brilliant, crucial, imperative pieces of the puzzle is, yeah, that we meet people where they're at. And, it's one of the, even with like digital marketing and stuff, the people that know, they're like, you gotta give more than you take. You got to get out there and contribute to these groups if you want people to, give back to you or to care about what you're doing. You have to show yourself as somebody who's giving, who's participating, who's engaging. And, yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up. It's a really, really important piece in community building, and I see it all the time. People building their online directories of all the cool regenerative projects around the globe. And Lord knows there's like 50 of these projects I've come across in the last, be cool if they work together. But but they're all so preoccupied with building their directory and getting other people to be on it. They're really, and just assuming that if they build it, then the people putting their projects on these directories will inherently eventually get some value out of that by getting exposure. But there's often less focus on what they can do now to make a difference in people's lives?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because as an analog based project, um, that has been one of my requests to some of these different digital platforms is can I just fill out one profile, and then you guys figure out how to get my one profile onto all of your different platforms? Because if I'm focusing out here in the digital world, I do not have my time to focus in my bioregion. And so once again, it is all about, it's just the shifting of the mindset. What are we in service to? And what we find is that when we put ourselves in service to what is here right in front of us, that all of a sudden those things that we needed come to us. We don't have to go externally to find that. And this is a journey and a lesson that I'm learning on a daily basis. But when we implemented the manos cambiadas, and then we would have the 4 hours of work together, and then we would share a lunch. And then after the lunch, we would have a seed exchange and a plant exchange. Well, Jason, I'm telling you, the seeds that I got access to then, the criollo seeds, and you know this word criollo. For those of you who don't know the word, it means like naturalized. It means those things that are really hardy to a place. It means those things that generations of farmers have been growing. Right. And so all of a sudden, I'm getting access to these beautiful seeds locally that I have never seen before. And then now we're able to start a seed bank, right? So that we can share these seeds out more. And so it's like really recognizing, how do we bring it local, and how do we use these digital tools? I am so grateful that you're here doing this podcast, and that I'm actually able to be a guest here, so that I can share what's going on, and so that we can all cross pollinate with one another. But how do we find those balances, right, between our analog life and our digital life? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll expose myself. I mean, when I started all this, I wanted to have I have we talked years ago about some of the things that I'd like to do with having a directory of ecologically powerful projects around the country. I wanted to have that directory too. I wanted to, but I really dropped in as I began. I was like, you know what though, I don't want to just hit everybody up and be like, hi, I'm a person and I want you on my directory. I decided, like, what can I offer? What do people need the most? And people need exposure, but they don't just need to be a one-liner on a directory. They need their story to be told. They need people to understand the richness that they're cultivating in these long form interview types of ways. So I invested into creating a platform that I could over time bring more and more of these people into my directory. But in a way that, I mean, Susanna Leff, our friend, was my first podcast guest. And immediately upon releasing her episode, within a couple of months, she's telling me that she's getting calls from people. And I had somebody contacting me being like, how do I get in touch with Susanna? So it was like, that was something I could do. It was something I could do to like really have people understand the richness of what she has to offer beyond seeing, her Facebook page or something. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for joining this initiative and sharing what you guys are doing. I've got so many more questions about your process there, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper into the Manos Cambiadas and ask, like, what's the frequency? How many people are involved? How do you organize that?
Jason, thank you so much about asking about Manos Cambiadas, because really it is my favorite. I think it's my favorite thing that I've ever been a part of. Um, because it's really taking us back to our roots, right? It's really taking us back to the basics of being with one another. And, everyone goes there with a smile on their face. And we leave at the end of like 4 hours, and we're all dirty and we're sweaty and we're tired. And everybody leaves with a smile on our faces as well, because it's something that we're just coming together to do together. And it's something that you can just feel the potency of it, right? It's completely outside of any type of capital framework. Um, we're sharing our labors, we're sharing food, we're sharing stories with one another. We're learning things as we go along. 2 years ago, when I planted rice, it was the first time that I've ever planted rice in Costa Rica. I've lived here for 22 years. I eat rice at least 3 times a week. I didn't know how you plant rice. And let me tell you, you have to make these little holes and then you have to drop the rice in the holes. And it is really difficult to stay focused on that, right? So, as somebody who's coming from a different life experience, you really get to develop even a deeper respect for the people who are out there supplying us with our food. Um, so, just to go back, Manos Cambiados happens once a week. We gather people together at 7 o'clock. We meet in Puerto Jimenez, which is kind of like the hub town, as I said. And then we carpool out to whatever farm we're going to. All of our farms are within a half-hour driving distance. We bring our tools. We bring our potluck lunch offering. We bring our seeds and our plants to share, and we just bring our will to put ourselves in service. We get to the site, the farmer welcomes us, we have a little circle, everyone introduces themselves. Those whose Spanish is really shaky get to practice their Spanish. The farmers, if they like to try and practice their English, practice their English. And just within 10 minutes of introducing ourselves to one another, there is just a coherence that occurs. And then that continues throughout, where the farmer is letting us know what they need. And then we are putting ourselves in service to that. And then as we're going along, we just learn a little bit more about their farm and their life. And, we share different tips as we're working together. And then always enjoy like a fantastic lunch. I mean, it's amazing what these lunches are like at the Manos Cambiadas through this potluck. And then share the fruits of our labor at the end with some seeds and some plants, and usually the farmer is sending us home with some food, and then we usually get home around 2 o'clock. So it's like 7 a.m. to 2 with the travel mixed in and the lunch and exchange. Yeah.
Okay. And how many people generally turn out for these every week? A range.
Well, our first week we had 6 of us. And we average about 18 people now.
Wow. Wow. So much can be done with 18 people in a few hours. That's great. Wow. That's powerful.
So much. Hmm.
And do you return to the same farms, or do you have a list long enough that you're able to go to a new place every week?
Well, actually, so this project from the beginning has just been, what do I want to say? I guess informal in nature. Now, the coalition of groups who started it, which was the cooperative, and then another group, Ascona, which is a local environmental group that also runs the local library. We were the two organizations that initially started Manos Cambiadas. Now we also have another group called Biriteca that is a group of ladies who do agroecological work, and so we are formalizing it more now so that we're actually focused on a group of farms that we will return to and be able to do a bit more capacity building. We're very, very interested in how to help them to increase their fertility on their farms, right? So that in the making of compost, in the making of bioferments, in the development of EM, so that we can help them to, as much as possible, stop relying as much on off-farm inputs and be able to develop what they need on site. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Have you is it and it's all focused on food growing and fertility? You guys aren't, like, building structures and stuff like that so much?
Yeah, we haven't been. There's actually these volunteer groups that come through. Um, that are usually like youth groups that come with a group of people, and then they usually come in with a budget. So when those groups come in, they're actually very interested in doing manos cambiadas, and so then we invite them in to invest in infrastructure for farmers. So like this past year, we had a couple of groups, and we put up greenhouses at different farms. Because I should say, from the get go, we started this program with no funding, and to this day we have no funding for this program. And so when we have groups that come in with financial resources, but they're not willing to pay for people power, they're only willing to pay for materials, then that's when we get connected in with what are the material needs of the farm, and then how can we serve as a hub, if you will, for getting the right farm connected with the right program.
All right, great. Yeah, it's reminding me of the interview I had with Ali Khan and Alnor out at Brave Earth. They have an organization called Fuerza del Amor, and in that case, they have a I'm not sure exactly what their fundraising model is, but they have funds are able to donate. If I remember correctly, like $500 or so to each project, and then they organize and they provide a foreman, like a person to be in charge, and then they bring in um, volunteers both from the kind of their foreigner based population in their project as well as in the local population. People show up and they get 10 plus people every week that go to a different person's house, and they do similar thing but with structures. They'll help them build a part of their house or an extension or a garage or a corral or whatever is needed. I check back in with them and see how much of their focus is on helping with agriculture. It'd be interesting to see the blend there. Yeah, sounds like what you guys are doing is super powerful. All right, so you guys are doing these community outreach work parties on people's land, helping them improve the regenerative qualities of their food growing systems, which is excellent. And you're providing the major missing piece of so many other foreigners or good intending people's intention to get farmers to enhance their regenerative practices, which is that you're helping them sell what they grow. That's a huge revelation I had when I was probably my third or fourth year here, when I was driving through the mountains looking at all of the coffee fields and the cows and the just saying, gosh, how can I convince these people to go organic and to practice these methods? And then it hit me like, oh, tell them that you'll buy everything they grow. And that was what when you and I years ago were working on a buyers club, which it sounds like you've got like a hybrid buyers club CSA going. That was the big thing, is like get a market going where we know how much of what people are buying from outside the system so that we can encourage people to plant that much and grow it, because we already have a market for it. If you tell people, follow my systems, go organic, use these methods, we're going to help you, and we're going to buy what you produce. That's what they need to hear to be like, all right, okay, I'll buy fewer cows this year and transition some of my land into organic crop production through your method, because I won't need those cows, because you're telling me that when I'd be selling cows, you're going to be buying my peanuts or whatever it is. So that was always something that I found to be like a really crucial element. And I'm really glad that you're tying both of those together. And that was something that you talked to me when we were preparing for the interview, that you really wanted to focus on the importance of regenerative projects not ignoring the socioeconomic context that they find themselves in. And so, what else are you doing? And from what I'm hearing I'm just making the assumption that there's a lot of local Tico people involved in these programs, not just on the benefiting side, but on the organizational side. What else are you guys doing with Igarones to bridge that gap?
the local people are involved on such a level that for the um, first year of the market, the co-op here itself was responsible for running the market. And at the end of the season, the producers said, "You know what? We're going to take over the market. We're going to form a junta. We are going to, we're going to take responsibility. Like, you don't need to carry this anymore. We're strong. We're ready. We know we have the support of the community, and we're going to take it forward." And, there's nothing that's more fulfilling than seeing people empowered to know that they have support, but that they have support so that they can step into their leadership. And so that's what the dance that we're doing now, is what are the ways that we can support them here, but that we fully ensure that their leadership is what's coming forward and what's driving everything. And that's a beautiful little dance in itself, and beautiful revelations of mindsets that need to shift on all different levels among me as a foreigner, among other foreigners, among the campesinos themselves. So it's this beautiful growth process, right? When we can take these real life examples and then begin to do that inner work of letting go of our prior assumptions or letting go of our prior mindsets. Um, so going back, I want to actually really focus, thank you for bringing this up, around land-based, not versus socioeconomic. But what we see is that people are focused on environmental issues very often, or foundations, or institutions, or organizations, and then others are focused on social or cultural or economic. And there's all this siloing happening. But the reality is, as you mentioned, Jason, that if we do not deal with the socioeconomic situation, that farmers who are engaged in practices that are degrading the land, if they cannot put food on their table, we can educate them all we want about the dangers of pesticides, about the dangers to the waterways and everything. They have to feed their family. And so, how then do we marry the socioeconomic and the environmental? When we started the Manos Cambiadas, when we started the Caja Verde, we were not focused on who are the organic growers or who are the people that are interested in regeneration. We focused on building trust, because by being able to say, we want to work with you, what do you need, and working with them, the trust is built. So then when we say, hey, look, we have this plan for you transitioning your farm, and in this plan, you are not going to lose money, then the trust is already inbuilt. And I see a lot of times, this idea of moving at the speed of trust, but that really is so critical. So when you have kind of nothing else to offer, because we didn't have any tools for regeneration, we didn't have any resources to bring in. What we had is like, okay, how can we just begin to build trust? I'm recognizing your humanity, and I'm recognizing the challenge that you're in right now. And I'm recognizing what I have available to me to help to meet that challenge, for us to walk together jointly forward. And so now, we don't have this master plan of how to do regeneration. We don't have like projects built up all over the place that's sexy to look at. But we have a level of trust within our community. We have a level of sense of family within our community that I think, to me, it's invaluable. It's, yeah.
Great. So what else is Igarones doing now or planning to do to build more bridges?
Well, one of the things that we are noticing here, the Osa Peninsula is, as you mentioned, it's a peninsula. It's pretty isolated. Um, we have um, we have people who are interested in receiving support in transitioning, but we also don't have people who are who either have the time or who have the expertise to be able to do this work collaboratively. So right now, Higuerones is setting itself up more as a bioregional learning center and as a hub. And part of that is we're inviting in people to come into a fellowship program with us. People who might have some interest or experience in regeneration, people who might have some tools that we don't have on site. We're inviting them to come and for us to all learn together. What they can learn from coming here and being a part of things is how you actually sink into a community, how you actually live a regenerative lifestyle. Because as we've been building our community, we've also been building our regenerative lifestyle practices. So we want to help to bring people along in that. We find so often that when people are coming from the global north, there's just so many ways that they don't yet know how to be in the global south, how to slow down, how to really reduce our consumption, reduce our waste. And so what we're inviting people into is a learning journey so that they can grow regeneratively and at the same time be offering these regenerative practices to our partners here on the ground. So that's an exciting thing that we're working on. And then Higuerones is also part of this collective, this brand new collective that is developing, which is this very thing around bridging the socioeconomic and the environmental. And this new collective is called Regenerosa. And I love it in Spanish because it's not just regenerate, but it's also generosa, right? So it's about generosity. And what we're actually really inviting in is for people to invest in 2.5% of the Earth's biodiversity by investing in the guardians, in the stewards of this land, the stewards that are not able to access the financial capital that they need to actually have programs that are beneficial to their land, but they have the dreams, they have the ideas, they have the will to do it. They just need the resources and the accompaniment. So rather than having people come in from the outside from a top-down way and institute projects, what we want to do is invite this capital in to help us to build this grassroots movement of people that are already engaged and wanting the best for their community, and to start to fund these people and these projects and these processes that need to happen to bring us into a regenerative future. So that's the name of the collective. We're doing a campaign. It's called 2.5% for the 2.5%. So we're inviting people to make an investment of whatever, 2.5% of whatever. Could be 2.5% of the cost of their vacation. It could be 2.5% of the book that they just launched. It could be $25,000, but something that's actually indicative of the fact that what we're trying to do is help to preserve 2.5% of the Earth's biodiversity that is represented here on the Osa Peninsula. So that's the thing that we're really, really excited about. That's the thing that we're moving forward in this new year.
Great. So you guys, I love it. So you've got Igarones, which is the kind of the Porte Jimenez local bioregion there, but then you've got the Regenerosa, which is focalizing on bringing together the larger peninsula area, but through a method that's opening up for the generosity of people that don't live on the peninsula, to recognize that 2.5% of the biodiversity of this planet is being stewarded by a tiny little sliver of grassroots people who give a damn more than most people could really imagine, and that you need people's support. And well, you don't need it because you're doing it, and the biodiversity is being protected, and what you're doing is so powerful and so effective that the generosity of others is only going to amplify the fortitude that you're creating there. And yeah, and spill over, and really, because you're right there on that little peninsula, you're feeding oxygen to people thousands of miles away. It's when you look at the global spin of things, literally, preserving that precious area is globally important. And so I'm really grateful to hear that you guys are creating this platform to receive that kind of support from outside of your bioregion. So I'm curious, with the creation of Regenerosa, what do you have planned? What's it going to look like? I know you're just getting it started, but as things develop, what can we expect to see? I imagine a website. Is it just a website with information about what's happening there and the opportunity for people to donate? Or are you planning on broadcasting any of your educational stuff through that platform, or anything else? Or is it still all in the kind of brainstorming incubation phase?
Well, this is the beautiful thing, and this is really one of those things where the analog and the digital can be bridged in a magnificent way. Is that in order to get the information out about the importance of this place in the world and about the importance of people who care about preserving places like this, actually investing in places like this, we need the help of the digital community. We don't know how to create websites that really attract people. We don't know how to create pitch decks. We don't know how to create our portfolio and our profiles on all of these different platforms. But that doesn't have to be done by this people in this place. That can be done by people anywhere in the world. And so we're actively actually inviting in volunteers to help us from the digital realm and in the digital world. We're also in the process of setting up our Open Collective, which is a way for us to receive tax deductible donations and be able to offer people the opportunity to see all of our bookkeeping in a transparent way. See our decision making, be able to fund the things that really need to be funded that don't necessarily have that infrastructure already in place to make them attractive to foundations or impact investors or any of those things. We're really reaching out to people's hearts. And we want to have a heart to heart connection. So if people want to get involved, they can contact us. The best way would be to just send an email to the Regenerosa Collective. That's REGENEROSA collective at gmail.com. And we could get right back to you with ways that you can plug in, with ways that you can donate, with ways that you can learn more, because we're also seeing ourselves as part of a global learning community, right? Because we're all trying to figure out how to do this and how to do this well, and we're talking about shifting structures, and we don't know what we're doing, but you know what? No one really knows what they're doing. So let's do it together. Going back to that thing around like none of us is an island. We need to have the strength of everybody just working together. So we invite people to come in and collaborate and offer your gifts in whatever way that you want to. Yeah.
Yeah, Tricia, it was super awesome to talk with you. Oh my gosh, that was a great interview. Everything, it was just so good. What you guys are doing is totally worth sharing with the world. All right, much love. Ciao.